the beginning of the nations. Tim, did I give you my... Do you have a slide thing for me for this?
I didn't check, because I was thinking you were not doing it.
I know it. I decided to do one. Let's see here. Let me quick send it over to you. Continue your fellowship.
There is a lesson 8.
Huh?
There is a lesson 8.
Okay, bring it up and let's see what it's got on it. See if I...
I'll just control it.
Just put it up there, and then if I need it, I'll see what it is. I'm sure it's got some of what I wanted anyway. Okay. So every time I have a cough drop when I start to teach a class or preach, I remember a story about a guy who thought he put a cough drop in, and because he figured he would finish preaching when his cough drop was done. Turned out to be a button that he put in his mouth. And he preached for hours. So mine is really a cough drop. So anyway, let's begin with an opening prayer. Our Father in heaven, thank you so much for the safe arrival of everyone here tonight. We're always thankful for times when we can assemble here together and open your word and study. We thank you so much for providing the revelation of the history of the redemption that you brought to us through Jesus Christ. And we pray, Father, that we will become conversant with it so that we can share it with others. And we pray your presence with us tonight as we study. Be with our family members here that are unwell, those that are traveling. Keep them safe for us. And again, please be with us. We thank you for Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. Amen. All right, so question 1, we got down to question 3. Was who makes up the population of the earth? And it was 8 people: Noah and his wife, Japheth and his wife, Shem and his wife, and Ham and his wife. And again, we just pointed out that indicates a worldwide flood. We are told in this section here as well that Ham was the father of Canaan there in verse 18. And that's just kind of preparing us for later on. I mean, this book, the Pentateuch, was given to the Israelites just as they were getting ready to come into the Promised Land, and that was going to be populated by Canaanites. So there we just have a little bit of a setup for that there. And we also have hinted at here that from these 3 sons, all the people who were scattered over the whole earth emanated from them. Then we talked about Noah's occupation, which was a man of the soil, Adamah, Adamah, a farmer, a husbandman, and he cultivated a vine, he planted a vineyard, and just like anybody who plants plants, you expect to be able to partake of them. What he failed to do was to partake in moderation. He became drunk, and the statement is made that his nakedness was exposed. And we talked a little bit about this last week, that I'm not sure. I don't think that it was just the fact that he was naked, nude. Nakedness has a connotation of sensuality and sexuality in the Old Testament. And whatever it was, and I have a couple of ideas that I have in my notes, but I'm not going to share them with you. Noah was rightly offended. Whatever happened, whatever was exposed, whatever this incorporates, he was rightly offended. So that's where we left off, chapter 9 and verses 22 and 23. And the question is, what did Ham do? And then what did Shem and Japheth do? What did Ham do? Yes. And how do you picture that happening? What kind of attitude do you picture Ham having?
Lacking shame.
Yeah, just like making fun of his dad. Right? And that might be right or wrong. I don't know. But he went and told his brothers outside, which also indicates that he didn't do what? He didn't cover him. He didn't undo whatever this was. And I didn't even finish this question on my thing here. What did Shem and Japheth do? They walked in backwards. They didn't want to see whatever this was and covered it up. And listen, it doesn't have to be, well, I guess we are all adults here. It doesn't have to be an incestuous kind of a situation. It doesn't have to be a homosexual kind of a situation. It could be, because again, if you expose the nakedness of your father by sleeping with your sister or an aunt or whatever like that, it could have just been Noah and his wife that were uncovered, and so they don't want to even see that, and they cover them both up. So question 4 was, in your opinion, what happened between Ham and his father? So Ham's reaction was he saw his father naked. It seems like he made light of it, shared his father's shame with his brothers, hoping all of them could have a good laugh, kind of a situation. And of course, Shem and Japheth walked in backwards and covered whatever this represents, Noah's nakedness, had their faces turned away, which is an act of total respect and honor and reverence for their father. And I know that it must have been bad, because what was Noah's reaction? He cursed. He cursed Ham's son, Canaan. And it could be that Ham was cursed as well, and it's reason, again, we're being told that it happened on Canaan because we're getting ready to go into the land of promised land, the land of the Canaanites here before they leave. And so Ham's offspring are going to bear the consequence of whatever Ham did, not his guilt, but the consequence of it, which, sin has two parts, sin, guilt and consequence. And sometimes our sin is our guilt, but what we do has a consequence in the lives of other people.
Dan,
Yes?
could you read in 24 what yours says? Mine says, when Noah woke from his wine, he knew that what his youngest son had done to him.
Yeah.
So that makes it appear that he didn't just see him,
Right.
he had done something to
Right.
him. Is that what yours says?
Yeah, mine says had done to him.
And it could have been just done to him, like, embarrassed him, or
Right.
shamed him.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah, after the fact kind of a thing. Or it could have been done to him while he was passed out.
Because if he just walked in and didn't know that his father was in this whatever situation it
Right.
was, you can't walk in backwards with a thing on to cover him up. You don't know.
If you don't know if you don't know what you're not supposed to see, you can't do that.
And so something after that he must have done as well.
Right.
I think something
Right.
he did to him that he's then.
Right.
Just,
Well, and okay, so he sees him there. Oh, I've already seen you, but I'm going to cover you up so nobody else does. I mean,
and instead he goes and talks to his
Yeah.
brothers
several years ago when we were living here, my mom and dad were visiting us, and my mom was taking a shower in our upstairs bathtub, and I think as she was getting out, she slipped and fell and grabbed the shower curtain, thinking this will stop me, which was not the case. And she's hollering for me, and I'm thinking, okay, this is not going to be good. And my dad he met me at the bathroom. He said, "I'll take care of this." Well, good. I'm really glad about that. But I would have had to do something like that, where I would have walked in backwards, or taken the shower curtain and covered her and then helped her up. So that incident in my life has a little bit of a meaning with this here. Afterwards, we got some non-slip stuff to put in the bottom of the tub. So anyway, Again, we don't know exactly what happened. We only know that it was wrong and that there were consequences of it. And Noah was, I think, rightfully incensed over it.
Do you think it was Canaan maybe that we saw with Ham?
Pardon me?
With Noah? Do you think maybe it was Canaan that was with Noah? Because it kind of says like Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father naked. Why did Canaan come into this at all?
Just because of the fact that when the Israelites go through this whole history and they come back to the promised land, the Canaanites are there.
I know, but he wasn't in this information. They weren't talking.
I think it's giving us a preview of what's going to happen, and that this curse on Canaan through Ham has been long-standing. In fact, and we'll bring this up later in our study. What had God said to do to the Canaanites when you go into the land? What was his instructions? Utterly destroy them.
Because, as I was looking at this one again, I'm going, why did he even tell us this story?
Right.
Why do we have to know about this some sort of sordid situation that happened? Well, because of the future situation.
Right.
Really not gonna come up.
You're going to see the same thing here in the next chapter when it talks about Abram, and what are we told about Sarah? He married Sarah, and she was barren and could not conceive. Why tell us that now? Because a little bit later, we're going to see what happened in a couple of different ramifications from that, with Hagar being brought in, and then Sarah actually being made able to conceive, and this great nation that came out of it, and the promise and all of that came with it. So sometimes in the scriptures, there is a foreshadowing or a presaging of things so that you can be aware of it as we go along, and that becomes important for us, yes.
It's also because the patterns in the Bible repeat over and over again, and that's purposeful. So at the beginning, we've got this, we've got the Adam and Eve, we've got the garden, we've got worshiping God, all this ideal state,
Right.
garden state, and then sin enters the world, and then there's even brothers who are separating and that kind of a thing, and then you just repeat that same pattern
Right.
over and over again. So we just saw Noah
Righteous and blameless.
righteous and blameless. He's come off the ark. He's offering sacrifices. It's this garden state.
Right.
A lot of the imagery is the same, and then we see a sin happen where it's Noah, he's getting drunk, all of that.
Right.
So that's and then now we're seeing the family starting to break apart because the brothers are now
Right.
separated and sinning as well, and that kind of thing. So you just see the same
Right.
pattern over and
Right.
over again,
Right.
which is, I think, also why this is included.
Right.
Nobody is perfect. The garden state doesn't ever stay the way it is.
Right. Yeah.
It always devolves.
Right.
It's quicker.
Kind of interesting, too, that it was both a result of fruit that both sins happened. So, yeah, it's fascinating to me the way those things, you start seeing those things. Okay, so question 5. Let's finish up this thought. When Noah found out, what did he say about Ham in verses 24 and 25? So he woke up and he found out what his youngest son, and this is how we know that Ham was the younger one of the three. What did he say? Okay, so he pronounced a curse on Ham and through him onto his son Canaan. And listen, curses that men levy like this do not necessarily have eternal consequences. The only one who determines eternal consequences is God. Okay? But there's temporal consequences. I mean, when we're going to see Isaac bless Jacob over Esau, that has a temporal consequence. I mean, Jacob gets the firstborn share of that. So, the Canaanites were generally, and of course, there's going to be individual exceptions to this, But the Canaanites were pretty regular subjects of foreign powers. Let's put it that way. And listen, there's a reason God, and we've talked about this before, there's a reason why God put his people in Canaan, why he wanted them there. It's right in the narrow part of the Fertile Crescent that then goes down into Egypt, and everybody has to go through there. They're going to go through there if they're going to go north, they're going to go through there if they're going to go south, unless they're sailing and they have to go to the Mediterranean, which there isn't a lot of that going on yet as far as trade goes. And so you have the King's Highway and you have the Great Highway that goes through there, and so everybody's going through there. So everybody wants that piece of property. All of the foreign powers want it. And the Canaanites are generally described as being evil and as being idolatrous. And so we're told that, as Debbie just said, the descendants of Shem would do what? Yeah, overpower him. And cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. And so there's going to be this overpowering. Israel's going to enter the land, and again, as we just said, God intended for them to wipe them out. That didn't occur, so I assume there's still descendants of Ham around because they failed to do that. So what did he say about, that's question 6, about Shem and Japheth in verses 26 and 27?
Blessed be Shem, and may Canaan be his servant.
Okay.
And may God enlarge Japheth, and may he live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant as well.
Okay. So, do you have the remote back there, Tim?
Yeah.
So here is a map. Aren't I brilliant that I can identify that? So here's the major nations. You got Egypt and Babylon and Mari and Assyria and Ararat and the Hittites. Here's Elam over here. Go to the next slide. And this one is, and again, realize that this is just general. Ham is over here mostly, but Ham is obviously where the Canaanites are. And Shem is generally in this middle area, and then Japheth is Europe and across into Asia is where his descendants go. Go one more slide. Let me see what that. Okay, so there again you can see this is at least color coded a little bit. So you can just leave that up there. So Shem, praise be to the Lord, the God of Shem. So it appears that Shem, out of all of his brothers, in general, chose to remain faithful to Yahweh. And again, while not 100%, they're certainly a lot more faithful to God than the descendants of Ham or Japheth were. Japheth, may his borders be enlarged, which if you think about the whole northern part of the continent, east and west, that's pretty much Japheth. And yet he is also going to be, so he's going to be fruitful, but he says he would also dwell or live in the tents of Shem. For the most part, I would say most of us in this room are descendants of Japheth. That's where we would find our DNA. How many of you have benefited from the descendants of Shem? You know, all of us, because Jesus came through that. So in a spiritual way, we are dwelling in the tents under the protection and with the blessing of Shem. It could very well have a kind of a spiritual blessing meaning. Mike, did you have a comment?
Well, just this map up there, there's a guy, Nathaniel Jensen, who is a geneticist, who then traces all all these lines back to 3 progenitors about 1,500 years or whatever it is at the time of Noah, and then he shows where those 3 lines went, and he identifies that Japheth went into this area, and he can show the genetics of these folks
Wow.
that are related. And so you can actually send your DNA, again, men can right now, women's are a little harder for them, but for the men's side, and he'll tell you whether you come from Ham's or Shem's or Japheth's line.
Wow.
Oh, that was fun.
And how much does he charge you for that?
No, I don't think Travis did it. You send it to him and he'll review
If you send him a little extra, can you be Shem?
I think that's the way it works.
Yeah, I want to be Shem. So any other questions on it? It's kind of interesting that we have this, all of this here, as we're now going through the genealogy, kind of in a sense, after Noah and after the flood, and then the sons of Noah, because the next thing that we're going to see is in chapter 10 and verse 1 is that opening line there of the summarization, and now we're going to be looking at the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, kind of in general, but then we're going to come back in the latter part of chapter 10 and see, okay, here's Shem. Here is the generations of Shem. All right, question 7 then. How does the genealogy of Noah end in verses 28 and 29?
He died.
Oh, thank you. Well, let's move on to the next question, because Debbie has so succinctly put it for us. How old was he when he died? 950 years. And so that means that after the flood, he lived another 350 years, approximately.
This episode of the curse doesn't really, we don't know how long it happened. It had to be long enough to grow a vineyard and for
Right.
3 men to have children,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right. So I don't know how long that took. But there's one thing, and I pointed this out before, what is the one thing that's not said about Noah, that's said about everybody else?
Had other sons and daughters.
That he had other sons and daughters. You're going to read, as we get into the rest of chapter 10, and chapter 11, you're going to see, and he had other sons and daughters. And here's Shem, and there's a whole line that goes down through to Terah, and every time, and they had other sons and daughters. Noah had 3. It appears that he only had the 3. All right. So my answer was just barely longer than yours, Debbie. So this may take a little while here. What stands out in the genealogies of Noah's sons in this chapter? Because chapter 10 kind of summarizes the descendants of Noah's 3 sons, in which, by the way, there's no really any other example in ancient history of a document like this, where you have a man, and then you have the 3 sons, and then you have their genealogies. I mean, that's not unusual to us, because we're all into family trees, so we go all this way, and we see all of these, and we love that. But in ancient literature, they just didn't do that. And the accuracy of this list here has been confirmed by archaeologists and by scholars, which again just further supports the fact that this is a historic document, historically accurate document. And so we're going to leave that one up there. I thought I had a thing of water here. So let's talk about Japheth first, in verses 2 through 5. What do we know about Japheth? He had? How many? He had 7 sons. Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tyrus. And generally thought, as seen from maps like this, and Mike's friend there that he was talking about, that all of these eventually migrated into Europe and India and Asia. Yes.
Throughout all of these lists, I find it strange that they list the sons. Does that mean they had no daughters?
No. Because you're going to find sometimes daughters are mentioned. For instance, when we get over to Nahor, Abram's brother, who, by the way, married his niece Milcah, he had Lot, but then he also, or Haran did, Haran had Lot, and he had Milcah, and he had Ishka. And so Haran's 2 daughters are named. It's not usual, but it's not.
But it doesn't mean they only had sons.
No, and you know, my translation, you know, usually has, and I don't know if it's in the Greek or not. I mean the Hebrew or not, but in verse 15, after Shelah had Eber, he lived and had other sons and daughters. Does yours just say and sons? Yeah. And I think the way that would normally be translated is that he had other children. And so, and that's still a problem today. You know, people say, you know, for instance, an elder, you know, his children must be faithful or respectful or whatever, however you're going to translate that. And some people say, okay, you have to have multiple because it says children. And others say no. You know, if I told everybody in here, everybody that has children, leave the room, do you think that the Warringtons and the Keens would get up and leave? Yeah. How many do they have? They have 1. So it's just usage. So I think obviously there's got to be daughters being born because the human race is continuing on. So he had 7 sons. He doesn't get very much ink here, does he? I mean, if you're thinking, you know, I'm Jephthah, you know, seems like I should have more numbers here, because I think Jephthah is the oldest. But as you look at this map, where does Jephthah live?
Japheth.
Huh?
You're saying Jephthah, the judge.
What? Oh, Japheth. Thank you. Where does Japheth live? He lives the furthest away from the area where biblical history finds its center. And so, again, to the people who are going to be reading this, the people who are going to initially receive it, Japheth, why do I keep saying Jephthah? He had a daughter. He had a daughter. Japheth just is living out of contact with the rest of them, and so it's not that important to the people who are going to receive this.
Well, and even importance aside, you know, it's hard to keep track of people who don't live close to you, especially when you don't have telephones and
Right.
internet and all that stuff. So if we assume that this was handed down verbally, you know, and maintained by the Holy Spirit, but handed down verbally through the generations, who's going to keep track of all of Japheth's children when
Right.
they've all moved and
Right.
gone away?
I mean, I don't have to go back very many generations. I can go back to my dad's generation and his brothers, and I can't name all of their kids. And I certainly can't name all of my grandfather's brothers on my dad's side or on my mom's side. I mean, just 2 or 3 generations out, and we don't remember them very well. And so they live the furthest away from the rest of Bible history and Bible geography. Now, somebody turn to Ezekiel chapter 38, and I'll give you two. You'll be in Ezekiel. That'll be close enough. 38 verses 1 through 3, and then chapter 39 and verse 1. Pardon me? I did say Ezekiel, and I didn't mean Ezra. You know, I know my mouth is turning twice. Okay, go ahead, Ross.
And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, towards Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal.
So here is God's prophecy against some of Japheth's descendants. And then did you read chapter 39 and verse 1?
I can. And you, son of man, prophesy against Gog, and say, Thus says the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal.
Okay. So, and even the other son there, Madai, is thought by some to be what was descending from him was the Medes, like of the Medes and the Persians. That was the race that came out of him. So it's not like they're not a part of the biblical story, at least in some ways, but they're really not that involved. And so wasn't enough reason to give a lot to him. So who are we told a lot about though next? Ham.
But can I ask a question before?
Sure.
we go there? So in 5, it says, Cindy's agreeing with me, although she doesn't know what I'm going to ask, but I'm sure she does. From these, the coastlands of the nations were separated into their lands. So the nations, are they talking about the individual
What verse are you reading from?
10:5?
Okay, so here's what my verse 5 says. From these the maritime people spread out into their territories by their clans within their nations, each with its own language. And of course that is looking forward to after chapter 11 when we have Babel. But these are, you can see if they're up there, there's lots of water. You're going to travel around. It's going to be necessary to be a maritime people.
So this is looking towards the future, just in
Right,
general.
right. Yeah, this is just the general view of the population of the earth as it's scattering and spreading. A kind of a thumbnail sketch of what's going to happen. Yes?
King James, by these were the isles of the Gentiles,
Okay,
which I think it just refers more of the maritime.
right. Well, so you have Great Britain and you have all of those areas that would be a part of that too.
So do you think they were already separated completely by water at that point, or later?
You mean as far as the continents are concerned?
Because if this,
This is looking forward to and including that. I mean, again, it's like if you read a newspaper article, in the first paragraph, you're going to get the story, the whole story, in a nutshell. If you want more details, then you read further. And this is the nutshell version of where all of these descendants ended up spreading and scattered to, with all of the events that happened in between.
Do you know on that map, or is it too far past the flood, where they were when the flood started?
I have no idea.
No idea.
No. And when the flood happened, it didn't look anything like this.
It didn't look like
No, I don't think so. I think we had one continent. That's the thing, when you start looking at this and you think, okay, well, where were they and when? And, it was just different. We're trying to tell you where Eden is, and if Eden was in a place that, on a planet and a continent that we have no idea what it looked like. Yes?
I mean, my grandparents grew up on a creek, and every year it floods, and every year after that flood, the creek looks completely different.
Yeah,
And that's a creek.
yeah,
And this is a flood that covered the whole earth.
right.
So the amount of water even.
It's amazing. So what do we know about Ham's sons? How many? He had 4 sons. Cush. Some of your translations will have Egypt, and some will have Mizraim, but it's the same word. And the reason my translation has Egypt is because it's believed that Egypt came out of Mizraim. But listen, all of these places were sons. They carried the name of their sons. So Egypt was somebody's son, just like Canaan was somebody's son. And then you also have Put and Canaan. Cush, when I think of Cush, I think of Ethiopia, and then you have Egypt, and you have all of these other places down here. Cush, what are we told about Cush? He had what? A famous son named Nimrod. And what are we told about him? He's a mighty warrior. He was a mighty hunter. He's the first one to be called a mighty person after the flood. In Jewish literature, he was a rebel. I mean, they don't treat him nicely in Jewish literature. And he was the architect of Babel, it appears, the Tower of Babel. And we'll see more about that in our later lesson, but that was a big monument to disobedience. And he was instrumental in two civilizations, Babel and what was the other one? Nineveh. So you have the Babylonians and you have the Ninevites, or the Assyrians. So Mizraim, or Egypt, founded that nation, race of people, and you can see that in verses 13 and 14. Egypt was the father of the Luddites, Anamites, the Habites, Naphtuhites, Pathrishites, Casluhites, from whom the Philistines came, and the Caphtorites. So, and the Philistines, came out of there. I mean, we're actually told that. And this is important here too, because the Philistines are going to be a thorn in the side of Saul and David and Israel there, again, because they didn't do what God had told them to do. And then, of course, we're going to have Canaan in verse 15. Well, I'll tell you what, when you read the children of Canaan, Sidon, you have Tyre and Sidon to the north. You have the Hittites, which is a huge nation and race of people. You have the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Arkites, the Sinites, the Arvadites, the Zimrites, and the Hamathites. And it says later the Canaanite clans scattered. But when I read that, when I started seeing Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, I remember what God told Abraham in chapter 15. You're going to have all of this property, and he lists them all off. The same group of people there. In Genesis 15, verses 18 through 21. And again, you have to remember that this was the one who was cursed. And Sidon, or the Sidonians, come from his line. The Het, which was one of his sons, is the Hittites, where that comes from. And let me just straighten out, if you ever heard this notion, that people believe that all black people came from the Canaanites and from Ham, the Hamites. And listen, that was racially motivated in the 17th and 18th centuries to try to support slavery, that they're a cursed people already, barely human beings, and that black skin was a result of a curse spoken by Noah. It's ridiculous. Okay? So, if you had that in your head, remove it. It's like people thinking that Cain's mark was that he was black. Well, if that was the case, they all died. They all died in the flood. So any questions on Ham? Shem, in verses 21 through 32. And what does this book and the Pentateuch here, what does it have to do with Shem?
Everything.
Yeah, they're the ones who are going to get this history. It's written for their benefit. It's the history, the information, so they have the bulk of the information here. And so Shem had how many sons? 5. Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. And what 2 sons in this section are singled out and expounded upon?
Aram and Arphaxad.
Yes, the Aram and Arphaxad. Aram is the youngest. If we're looking at the order in birth order, which you can't always do that, and Arphaxad, who, as I was looking at it today, has become my hero because he gets a lot of ink and he's a middle child, just like me. So, because Abraham is going to come through Arphaxad, David is going to come through Arphaxad, and so is Jesus. So that's why he is, I think, singled out here. And among the sons of Arphaxad are who?
Selah.
Peleg and Eber, yes. And what does it say about Peleg in verse 25?
Well, that's Eber's sons, is Peleg and
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Arphaxad was the father of Shelah, and Shelah was the father of Eber. And the two sons were born to Eber. One was Peleg, and the other one was Joktan. You're right. So what are we told about Peleg?
Earth was divided.
Okay, so in his days, the earth was divided. The Hebrew word for earth there is eretz, E-R-E-T-S. And most of the time, it refers to the physical earth. If you go to Genesis chapter 1 and verse 11 and 12, it talks about let the earth bring forth plants and vegetation. And it can stand, if you look in chapter 11 and verse 9, where it says that the whole earth was, the language of the whole earth was confused. Now we're talking about the people of the earth, and so the context determines that. So when it says in his days the whole earth was divided, it could refer to the division that took place because of the languages being confused. It could, and this is kind of my preference, or not my preference, I kind of lean towards that it also refers to the spreading of the continents and the separating of the peoples. Because, again, God wanted them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And so dividing the earth by scattering them because of language and because of moving continents would be a double whammy for that, both working to bring about God's will with regard to that. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 10. Does anybody else have any comments that you want to see? Again, you see down in verse 31 of chapter, these are the sons of Shem by their clans and languages in their territories and nations. So again, we're seeing some of the things that are contained in chapter 10 include what we're about to read historically in chapter 11. Okay? So question 9. No, I'm not going to do that. We have a minute. I'm not going to get into this. But you can work on it. And Ross will be happy to answer your question next week because he's going to be teaching the class. And I don't even know if he's going to bring up all the stuff that I'm going to give him, so he gets his option on that. So any other comments on what we just looked at tonight with the last of chapter 9 and all of chapter 10? All right. So then that's where you'll start next week, Ross, is question 9. I'll mark it on mine too. And there's the new lessons for lesson 9, which is the introduction of Abraham, are in the shelf back there. And it's two-sided. If you got an earlier one, if you have that one, if you got one before, you'll want to get the next one because I've changed the map on the back. Unless you got this tonight. Okay, then you're good. So I put the map because question, is it 5 or 6 or 6, used the provided map to trace the journey of Abram. And so there you'll be able to do that. And I'll have I already have the PowerPoint that will kind of show you where every place is. All right. Thank you very much for the